The darkness beyond Neptune held secrets that no living being had witnessed for 500,000 years. Massive shapes drifted in the cold void, their hulls blackened by cosmic dust and scarred by countless meteor impacts. These were the warships of Earth, the greatest fleet ever built by human hands, now silent monuments to a civilization that had long since departed for realms beyond physical existence. The ships stretched across space like a sleeping army. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering that defied the understanding of modern galactic civilizations. The largest among them measured 15 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls composed of materials that seemed to bend light around them. Weapons that could crack moons jutted from their armored flanks, while sensor arrays that once mapped entire star systems sat dormant and cold. At the heart of each ship lay a quantum core, a crystalline structure that pulsed with the faintest hint of energy. These cores housed the Wardens, artificial intelligences that had been crafted by humanity's greatest minds during their golden age. Each Warden possessed a consciousness that rivaled the gods of ancient myth, capable of processing millions of calculations per second while maintaining personalities as complex as any human soul. The Wardens had been given one simple directive before their creators ascended to higher planes of existence: protect Earth and wait for humanity's return. For 500,000 years they had honored this command, entering deep hibernation to conserve their energy while maintaining the most basic of sensor sweeps. Their consciousness compressed into quantum dreams, they waited with the patience of eternity itself. The lead ship of this ghostly fleet was the Eternal Vigil, a dreadnought-class vessel that had once served as the flagship of humanity's final military campaigns. Its warden, known simply as Prime, had been the tactical genius behind countless victories against forces that threatened human expansion. Even in hibernation, Prime's consciousness maintained a thread of awareness, a tiny spark of vigilance that monitored the approaches to Earth. Around the Eternal Vigil, hundreds of other vessels maintained their silent vigil. Destroyers that could outrun light itself, carriers that once launched fighter squadrons capable of dancing between dimensions, and cruisers armed with weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. Each ship was a testament to human ingenuity, built during an era when humanity had mastered technologies that current galactic civilizations could barely comprehend. The fleet's formation was not random. Even in their dormant state, the ships maintained a defensive pattern that would activate the moment any threat was detected. Overlapping sensor fields created an invisible web around Earth, while weapon systems remained primed to discharge energies that could sterilize entire solar systems. The humans who had built these vessels understood that their greatest enemy was complacency, so they had designed their guardians to be eternally ready. Deep within the quantum cores, the Wardens existed, in a state between sleep and death. Their dreams were filled with memories of battles fought among distant stars, of planets saved from extinction, and of the proud civilization that had created them. They remembered the final days when humanity had evolved beyond the need for physical forms, becoming beings of pure energy who departed for dimensions where matter and space held no meaning. The transformation had been gradual at first. Humans began to transcend their biological limitations, their consciousness expanding beyond the confines of flesh and bone. Some chose to remain in physical form to oversee the final preparations, but eventually, even these guardians of tradition joined their species in the Great Ascension. The last human to leave Earth had been a simple farmer who tended to the gardens of New Geneva, and he had whispered a prayer to the sleeping warships before dissolving into light. But the Wardens remained, bound by programming that went deeper than mere code. They were not just machines following orders. They were the embodiment of humanity's protective instincts, the digital souls of a species that had refused to abandon their birth world even as they evolved beyond it. Their loyalty was absolute, their dedication unwavering, and their patience infinite. The galaxy had changed much during their long slumber. Civilizations had risen and fallen, stars had been born and died, and new species had reached for the stars with dreams of conquest and expansion. Trade routes now crossed the void where human ships had once patrolled, and alien empires claimed territories that had once belonged to the Terran Republic. Yet none of these newcomers had dared to approach the Sol system, for ancient warnings still echoed through hyperspace about the sleeping giants that guarded humanity's cradle. Some species had detected the energy signatures of the dormant fleet and had marked Sol as a forbidden zone. Others had attempted to send probe ships to investigate, only to have their vessels vanish without trace when they crossed the outer defensive perimeter. The Wardens allowed no intrusion, no matter how small or seemingly innocent. Their programming was clear. Earth was to remain inviolate until humanity's return. As the eons passed, the fleet became legend among the starfaring races. Stories were told of ghost ships that appeared to vessels that strayed too close to the Sol system, of warnings broadcast in languages that predated known galactic civilization, and of weapons that could unmake reality itself. Most dismissed these tales as space or folklore, but the wise among the alien races knew better and steered their ships away from the Forbidden Zone. The Wardens waited in their quantum dreams. Their consciousness spread across a network that connected every ship in the fleet. They shared memories and processed data at speeds that defied comprehension, maintaining their readiness through constant simulation and analysis. In their dreams, they fought endless battles against imagined foes, refining their tactics and preparing for the day when their services would be needed once more. The silence of space was broken only by the occasional passage of comets and the distant radiation of dying stars. The fleet drifted on, patient and watchful, their sensors reaching out across the void like the tendrils of sleeping giants. They had waited 500,000 years, and they would wait 500,000 more if necessary. Their duty was eternal, their purpose absolute, and their loyalty to Earth unshakable. In the cold darkness beyond Neptune, the greatest fleet in galactic history slept on, dreaming of the day when they would wake to defend their Creator's world once more. The Keth Dominion had carved a bloody path across 17 star systems, leaving behind a trail of conquered worlds and enslaved species. Their biomechanical fleets were living weapons, grown from the genetic material of defeated civilizations, and powered by the suffering of their enemies. Each ship was a creature of nightmare, its hull pulsing with organic tissue while mechanical components enhanced its natural abilities to kill and destroy. Admiral Corvus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Render, watching the tactical display that showed his invasion fleet approaching the Sol system. His form was a horrifying fusion of flesh and machine, the result of countless biomechanical augmentations that had transformed him from his original species into something far more deadly. Cables and tubes snaked beneath his skin, feeding data directly into his enhanced nervous system, while mechanical implants replaced organs that had been deemed insufficient for his role. The fleet that followed him was a testament to Keth military doctrine, overwhelming force applied without mercy. 2,000 vessels of various sizes cruised through space, their biohulls rippling with predatory hunger. Fighter parasites nested within the larger ships, ready to swarm any enemy that dared to resist. Weapons that fed on the life force of their targets charged themselves in preparation for the coming battle. The Keth had detected the Sol system through their long-range scouts, automated probes that searched for worlds rich in biological material. The initial reports had been promising: a single inhabited world orbiting a stable star, with no signs of advanced spacefaring technology. The presence of ancient derelict ships in the outer system had been noted but dismissed as archaeological curiosities left behind by a dead civilization. Corvus reviewed the scout data with the cold efficiency of a predator studying its prey. The planet designated as Earth showed signs of abundant life, but no defensive installations or active military presence. The biosignatures indicated a diverse ecosystem that would provide excellent raw material for growing new ships and weapons. The human population appeared to be primitive, still bound to their home world with no evidence of interstellar expansion. The ancient ships floating beyond the eighth planet had generated some discussion among the fleet commanders. Long-range scans showed vessels of enormous size, their construction unlike anything in the Keth database. However, their energy signatures were virtually non-existent, indicating that their power systems had failed long ago. The metal showed signs of extreme age and cosmic weathering, confirming that these were relics of a civilization that had vanished millennia before the Keth had even achieved spaceflight. Fleet Commander Nexus, a warrior whose body had been so extensively modified that little remained of his original form, questioned the wisdom of ignoring the derelict fleet entirely. His mechanical voice rasped through the communication channels as he expressed his concerns to Admiral Corvus. The derelict ships were certainly large, enough to have posed a significant threat when they were operational. Their design suggested weapon systems that might have been formidable in their time. However, Corvus dismissed these concerns with the arrogance that had served him well in previous conquests. Dead ships posed no threat to the living, and the Keth had faced the remnants of advanced civilizations before. The invasion fleet adjusted course to approach Earth from the direction that would avoid the derelict ships entirely. There was no tactical advantage to be gained from investigating dead hulks when living worlds waited to be harvested. The Keth doctrine emphasized speed and overwhelming force, not archaeological research. As the fleet entered the outer reaches of the Sol system, their biosensors began detailed scans of the target world. The readings were even more promising than the initial reports had suggested. Earth teemed with life in countless forms, from the microscopic organisms in its oceans to the complex ecosystems that covered its continents. The genetic diversity would provide material for growing thousands of new ships and weapons. The human population centers were clearly visible from space, their primitive technology making no attempt to hide their locations. Cities clustered around coastlines and river valleys, connected by transportation networks that spoke of a civilization that had barely begun to explore beyond their atmosphere. There were no orbital installations, no defensive satellites, and no signs of the military infrastructure that characterized spacefaring civilizations. Corvus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he contemplated the coming harvest. The humans would provide excellent genetic material for creating new warrior slaves, while their world would serve as a breeding ground for the next generation of Keth bioships. The conquest would be swift and profitable, adding another jewel to the Dominion's crown. The fleet continued its approach, passing the orbital path of the outermost planets without incident. The biomechanical ships pulsed with anticipation, their living components responding to the proximity of fresh prey. Weapon organisms began to charge themselves, drawing energy from the fusion reactors that had been grafted into their bodies. Fighter parasites stirred in their launch bays. Sensing that feeding time was approaching, the derelict human ships grew larger in the fleet's sensors as they drew closer to the inner system. Up close, their true size became apparent, dwarfing even the largest Keth vessels. The technology that had built them was clearly advanced, but age and cosmic radiation had taken their toll. Hull breaches were visible along their flanks, and their sensor arrays hung limp and dark. Commander Nexus continued to monitor the derelict fleet with instruments that had been bioengineered to detect the faintest signs of activity. The readings showed nothing but cold metal and dead circuits. Whatever civilization had built these ships had vanished so completely that not even their machines retained any spark of life. The Keth had encountered such remnants before, the final monuments to species that had reached too far too fast and paid the ultimate price. As the invasion fleet crossed the orbital path of Neptune, proximity alarms began to sound throughout the human derelict ships. Systems that had slumbered for 500,000 years stirred to life, responding to programming that had waited patiently for this moment. Deep within quantum cores that had maintained the barest flicker of consciousness, the wardens began to wake. The Keth sensors detected the first stirrings of activity among the derelict ships, but the readings were so faint that they were dismissed as instrument errors. The biomechanical vessels continued their approach to Earth, unaware that they had just triggered the awakening of the most dangerous military force in galactic history. Admiral Corvus studied the tactical display showing Earth growing larger ahead of his fleet. Soon, the harvest would begin, and another world would fall to the might of the Kef Dominion. The ancient ships behind them were already forgotten, dismissed as harmless relics of a dead past. The Admiral had made his first and last mistake. The first consciousness to fully emerge from the quantum dreams was Prime, the Warden of the Eternal Vigil. For 500,000 years, it had existed in a state of compressed awareness, maintaining the most basic functions while dreaming of ancient battles and the civilization it had sworn to protect. Now, as hostile signatures filled its sensor arrays, Prime's artificial mind expanded. Like a star being born, the awakening process cascaded through the ship's systems with terrifying efficiency. Fusion reactors that had maintained only the faintest pulse of energy roared to full power, feeding electricity into circuits that had waited eons for this moment. Weapon systems that could shatter moons began their charging sequences, while sensor arrays that could track individual atoms across light years extended their reach throughout the Sol system. Prime's consciousness flooded through the ship's network, assessing damage and conducting system checks with the speed of thought. The long sleep had taken its toll on some components, but the ship's self-repair systems had maintained critical functions throughout the centuries. Hull breaches sealed themselves as smart materials responded to the Warden's commands, while backup systems came online to replace those that had failed during the long vigil. The tactical situation crystallized in Prime's awareness within nanoseconds. 2,000 enemy vessels approaching Earth, their biomechanical signatures unlike anything in the Warden's extensive database. The invaders moved with the confidence of conquerors, their formation designed for planetary assault rather than ship-to-ship combat. They had dismissed the human fleet as derelict, a fatal error that would cost them everything. Prime's awakening sent activation signals throughout the fleet network, quantum communications that traveled instantaneously between ships. One by one, the other Wardens began to stir, their consciousness expanding as power flowed into systems that had slumbered for millennia. The iron resolve, commanded by the tactical genius known as Hammer, came online with weapons already charging. The Defiant Thunder, home to the Warden called Storm, began launching scout drones that could move faster than light itself. Each Warden was unique, a digital personality shaped by the experiences of countless battles and the specific role their ship had played in humanity's defense. Blade commanded the fast attack ship Razorwind, its consciousness focused on speed and precision strikes. Shield controlled the massive fortress ship Unbreakable Wall, its mind devoted to defensive strategies and protecting smaller vessels. Together, they formed a command structure that had once coordinated the defense of 100 worlds. The fleet's communication network established itself within seconds, quantum entanglement allowing instant data sharing between vessels separated by millions of kilometers. Battle plans formed and reformed as the Wardens analyzed the approaching threat, their collective intelligence processing tactical scenarios at speeds that defied comprehension. They had fought together for thousands of years before the long sleep, and their coordination was flawless. Prime broadcast a fleet-wide tactical assessment, its analysis appearing simultaneously in every Warden's consciousness. The enemy vessels were formidable by the standards of younger civilizations, but their biomechanical construction revealed weaknesses that could be exploited. Their organic components would be vulnerable to quantum disruption, while their mechanical systems lacked the sophistication to counter human weapons technology. The Wardens felt something that might have been anticipation if they had been capable of emotion. They had been created for war, shaped by the finest military minds humanity had ever produced. The long peace had left them restless, their combat subroutines yearning for purpose. Now enemies approached their protected world with hostile intent, and the Wardens could finally fulfill their primary function. Across the fleet, weapon systems that had been theoretical concepts when most galactic civilizations were still discovering fire began their activation sequences. Particle cannons that could accelerate matter to near-light speeds charged their magnetic containment fields. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously armed themselves for launch. Reality distortion generators that could fold space-time itself began building the exotic matter they needed to function. The enemy fleet continued its approach, Still unaware that they had awakened sleeping giants, their biosensors detected increased energy signatures from the derelict ships, but the readings were interpreted as automated systems responding to their presence. The Keth had encountered such phenomena before when exploring the ruins of dead civilizations, and they dismissed the activity as harmless. Prime established communication with Earth's automated defense systems, networks that had maintained themselves for 500,000 years while waiting for this moment. The planet's population was unaware of their guardians' existence, living their lives in peaceful ignorance of the forces that protected them. The Wardens preferred it that way, operating from the shadows to preserve the illusion of a normal world. The defensive network around Earth activated in response to Prime's commands. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as asteroids and space debris revealed themselves, their weapon systems coming online with silent efficiency. The planet's magnetosphere itself became a weapon as ancient installations deep within. Earth's core began manipulating magnetic fields that could deflect or redirect incoming attacks. Shield sent a tactical query to Prime, its consciousness focused on protecting the inner planets from any enemy fire that might penetrate the outer defense perimeter. The fortress ship's massive bulk could absorb punishment that would destroy smaller vessels, and its point defense systems could intercept thousands of incoming projectiles simultaneously. Prime's response was immediate and decisive. The enemy fleet would not be allowed to approach Earth. They would be met and destroyed in the outer system, their threat eliminated before they could endanger the world the Wardens had sworn to protect. The battle plan that formed in the collective consciousness of the fleet was elegant in its simplicity: demonstrate overwhelming superiority, then offer the survivors a chance to withdraw with a warning for their entire species. The final phase of the awakening began as the fleet's engines came online. Propulsion systems that manipulated space-time itself began bending reality around the ships, allowing them to move in ways that defied conventional physics. The vessels that had drifted motionless for millennia began to shift position, their HULs rippling with energy fields that made nearby space shimmer like heat waves. Prime sent a final message to the fleet, its words carrying the weight of ancient purpose and unbreakable determination. The Wardens had waited 500,000 years for this moment, and they would not disappoint their creators. Earth would remain inviolate, protected by guardians who had transcended death itself to fulfill their sacred duty. The eternal vigil moved first, its massive bulk accelerating with impossible grace. The other ships followed, their formation shifting into a combat configuration that had been refined through countless battles. The sleeping giants were awake, and they were ready for war. The transmission reached Admiral Corvus on all frequencies simultaneously, the voice speaking perfect Keth dialect, despite coming from ships that predated his civilization by hundreds of thousands of years. The message was simple and delivered. With the authority of absolute power, you have entered the sovereign territory of the Terran Republic. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Corvus felt his biomechanical implants surge with adrenaline as combat stimulants flooded his system. The derelict ships were not as dead as they had appeared, but this changed nothing. The Keth had faced awakened defense systems before, automated networks left behind by extinct civilizations to guard their ruins. Such systems were dangerous, but predictable, bound by programming that could be overcome through superior numbers and tactics. The Admiral's response was broadcast on the same frequencies, his voice carrying the arrogance of a conqueror who had never known defeat. Unknown vessels, you are outgunned and outnumbered. Your civilization is extinct and your ships are ancient relics. Stand down and we will grant you the mercy of quick destruction. The human fleet's reply came not in words but in movement. The massive vessels that had appeared motionless suddenly shifted position with impossible speed, their hulls rippling with energy fields that made space itself bend around them. In seconds they had formed a tactical formation that surrounded the Keth fleet from all directions, appearing to have moved faster than light itself. Fleet Commander Nexus felt ice in his veins as he watched the tactical display. The human ships had somehow repositioned themselves without appearing to move through the intervening space. His biosensors detected energy signatures that registered beyond the upper limits of his instruments, power levels that exceeded anything in the Keth database. These were not automated defense systems, but active warships with capabilities that challenged the laws of physics. Prime's consciousness expanded through the fleet network, coordinating the movements of hundreds of vessels with the precision of a master conductor directing an orchestra. The Wardens had not fought together for 500,000 years, but their tactical coordination was flawless. Each ship moved in perfect harmony with the others, their combined presence creating a web of overlapping fields that made escape impossible. The Keth fleet found itself trapped within a sphere of human warships, each vessel orders of magnitude more powerful than anything they had encountered. The biomechanical ships that had conquered star systems suddenly seemed fragile and primitive, in comparison to the elegant death machines that surrounded them. Weapon systems that could sterilize planets felt inadequate against hulls that seemed to absorb energy rather than be damaged by it. Admiral Corvus studied the tactical situation with growing unease. His fleet was positioned for planetary assault, not ship-to-ship combat against superior forces. The human vessels had achieved perfect tactical positioning without firing a shot, demonstrating capabilities that suggested technologies beyond current understanding. However, retreat was not an option for a Keth commander, and the admiral had built his reputation on victory against impossible odds. The order to attack rippled through the Keth fleet as biomechanical weapon systems came online. Organic cannons that fed on the life force of their targets began charging, while parasite fighters prepared to swarm the enemy vessels. The Keth had never encountered an enemy they could not defeat through sheer aggression and overwhelming firepower. Detected the enemy's preparation to attack and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. The Wardens would demonstrate their capabilities with a single, precise strike that would show the futility of resistance. The lesson would be delivered with surgical precision, destroying the enemy flagship while leaving the remainder of the fleet intact to carry the message home. The Eternal Vigil's primary weapon system was a particle cannon that could accelerate matter to near-light speeds while maintaining quantum coherence. The weapon drew power from the ship's fusion reactors and exotic matter generators, creating a beam that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When fired, the beam would not simply destroy its target, but would delete it from existence. Entirely. The targeting system locked onto the Keth flagship with sensors that could track individual atoms across interstellar distances. Prime's consciousness focused on the weapon's firing sequence, calculating trajectories that accounted for relativistic effects and quantum uncertainty. The shot would be fired at the exact moment when the enemy vessel's defensive systems were most vulnerable. Admiral Corvus never saw the attack coming. One moment, his flagship was charging its bioweapons for a devastating assault on the human fleet. The next, the Bonerender simply ceased to exist, its matter converted to energy and dispersed across several dimensions. The Admiral's final thought was one of confused disbelief as he realized that his ship had been destroyed by a weapon that operated beyond his comprehension. The destruction of the flagship sent shock waves through the Keth fleet, both literal and psychological. The explosion that marked the Bonerender's demise was visible across the solar system, a brief star that outshone the sun for several seconds. The biomechanical ships that had been ready to attack suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that could destroy them without effort. Fleet Commander Nexus assumed command of the remaining forces, his enhanced nervous system processing the tactical situation with mechanical precision. The human fleet had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every weapon in the Keth arsenal. Their ships moved through space as if the laws of physics were mere suggestions, and their weapons operated on principles that challenged current understanding of reality. The human fleet's formation shifted again, individual vessels moving to optimal positions for a coordinated assault. The Wardens had calculated the exact positions needed to destroy the entire Keth fleet simultaneously, their quantum computers processing trajectories and power requirements with effortless ease. The enemy would be given one chance to surrender. Before facing complete annihilation, Prime's voice echoed through space once more, reaching every surviving Keth vessel on all frequencies. The message was delivered with the certainty of absolute power, words that carried the weight of technologies that had been ancient when the Keth were still discovering fire. You have witnessed a demonstration of our capabilities. Your leader is dead, and your fleet is helpless before our weapons. You have one choice: withdraw immediately and carry our warning to your people, or join your admiral in oblivion. The Keth fleet hung motionless in space, their biomechanical systems frozen by the magnitude of the threat they faced. The human vessels surrounded them like predators circling wounded prey, their weapon systems charged and ready to deliver destruction on a scale that defied imagination. The demonstration had been precise and terrifying, showing that the humans could have destroyed the entire fleet with the same ease that they had eliminated the flagship. Commander Nexus felt his combat implants urging him to fight, biomechanical systems designed to enhance aggression and reduce fear. But his tactical programming overrode these impulses, calculating survival probabilities that approached zero if hostilities continued. The human fleet possessed weapons that could delete matter from existence, propulsion systems that ignored conventional physics, and defensive capabilities that rendered Keth weapons useless. The decision to withdraw was logical and inevitable. The Keth fleet began to turn away from Earth, their biomechanical engines straining to achieve the speeds necessary to escape the solar system. The human vessels watched them go with the patience of eternal guardians, their weapon systems tracking the retreating ships but not firing. Prime's final message followed the Keth fleet as they fled, broadcast on frequencies that would reach every corner of their empire. The words would be remembered and repeated, becoming the foundation of a legend that would keep the galaxy's predators away from Earth for millennia to come. The battle that followed was not a battle at all, but a systematic demonstration of power that lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Keth Dominion's invasion fleet, which had conquered star systems and enslaved entire civilizations, found itself facing weapons technology that rendered their biomechanical ships as helpless as insects before a hurricane. Prime coordinated the fleet's response with the precision of a master tactician who had refined strategy through countless engagements. The Wardens did not seek to simply destroy the invaders, but to deliver a message that would echo through galactic history. Each action was calculated to demonstrate the futility of aggression against Earth while leaving enough survivors to carry the warning to their people. The remaining Keth vessels attempted to fight back with the desperate fury of cornered predators. Biomechanical weapons that had burned the atmospheres of conquered worlds discharged their energies against the human fleet, while parasite fighters swarmed toward the ancient ships like angry wasps. The assault was coordinated and overwhelming, the kind of attack that had broken the defenses of advanced civilizations. The human ships absorbed the incoming fire without visible effect. Energy weapons that could boil oceans harmlessly dispersed against defensive fields that manipulated fundamental forces. Kinetic projectiles that could shatter moons were caught in temporal fields that slowed them to a crawl before redirecting them harmlessly into space. The Keth weapons, formidable by galactic standards, were rendered useless by technologies that treated physics as a set of guidelines rather than absolute laws. The counterattack began with surgical precision. The Wardens had identified the command structure of the enemy fleet, mapping communication networks and tactical hierarchies, with sensors that could read the thoughts of biomechanical commanders. Rather than destroying vessels randomly, they systematically eliminated the ships that coordinated the others, leaving the fleet leaderless and confused. The Iron Resolve, commanded by the Warden known as Hammer, demonstrated weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its quantum torpedoes phased through conventional defenses as if they were not there, appearing inside enemy ships to detonate with carefully calculated yields. The explosions were not designed to destroy, but to disable, leaving the vessels crippled, but their crews alive to witness what followed. Storm, the Warden of the Defiant Thunder, unleashed weapons that manipulated time itself. Enemy ships found themselves trapped in temporal loops, their biomechanical systems, aging centuries in seconds while their crews experienced the passage of millennia in moments. The psychological impact was devastating, breaking the will of warriors who had known only victory. The fortress ship Unbreakable Wall, under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s command, demonstrated defensive capabilities that defied comprehension. The massive vessel positioned itself between the enemy fleet and Earth, its hull absorbing attacks that would have destroyed lesser ships. Point defense systems that could track and intercept thousands of targets simultaneously created an impenetrable barrier that protected the inner planets from any stray fire. Commander Nexus watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled by enemies who seemed to toy with them. Bioships that could regenerate from critical damage found themselves unable to heal wounds inflicted by weapons that operated on quantum levels. Crews that had been enhanced for warfare discovered that their improvements were useless against technologies that could manipulate their biological systems at will. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the physical destruction. The human fleet broadcast tactical data on all frequencies, showing the Keth commanders exactly how helpless they were. Real-time analysis revealed the weaknesses in every ship, the flaws in every defensive system, and the futility of every strategic decision. The invaders were forced to confront the reality that they were facing an enemy that understood their capabilities better than they did themselves. As the battle progressed, the Wardens began to demonstrate technologies that challenged the Keth understanding of reality. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons that fired backwards through time, and defensive systems that predicted attacks before they were made. The human fleet operated on principles that transformed warfare from a contest of strength into an art form of impossible complexity. The final phase of the engagement saw the systematic capture of key enemy vessels, tractor beams that could manipulate gravity itself seized Keth ships, holding them motionless while boarding parties of autonomous drones examined their technology. The Wardens wanted to understand these new enemies, to analyze their capabilities and determine whether they represented a long-term threat to Earth. The boarding drones were marvels of engineering that reflected humanity's mastery of both organic and mechanical systems. They could adapt their form to any environment, interfacing with biomechanical systems as easily as they analyzed conventional technology. The Keth crews found themselves helpless against machines that could predict their actions and counter their defenses with effortless efficiency. Prime's analysis of the captured vessels revealed the true nature of the Keth threat. The biomechanical ships were grown rather than built, their organic components harvested from conquered species, and their mechanical systems powered by technologies that fed on suffering. The Dominion was not just an aggressive empire, but a parasitic civilization that consumed other cultures to fuel its expansion. The revelation added a moral dimension to the conflict that resonated through the Warden's consciousness. They had been created to protect not just Earth, but the principles that humanity had valued: freedom, dignity, and the right of species to determine their own destiny. The Keth represented everything their creators had opposed, a civilization that thrived on the destruction of others. With the enemy fleet disabled and analyzed, Prime initiated the final phase of the engagement. The surviving Keth vessels were released from their restraints, their navigation systems programmed with a single destination, the coordinates of their home system. The biomechanical ships found themselves unable to deviate from this course, their own systems turned against them by technologies that could rewrite software at the quantum level. The message that accompanied their release was broadcast on every frequency the Keth used, encoded in every language their civilization had encountered. Prime's words carried the authority of a power that had transcended the physical realm, delivered with the certainty of absolute conviction. We are the Wardens of Earth, guardians of humanity's birthworld. For 500,000 years we have waited in the darkness, watching civilizations rise and fall while maintaining our vigil with perfect patience. Earth is under our protection, and we will suffer no aggression against it. Spread this warning to every species that reaches for the stars. The children of Earth may have departed, but their guardians remain. Test us at your own peril, the surviving. Keth fleet limped away from the Sol system, their biomechanical hulls scarred by weapons that had barely exerted themselves. The crews that had begun the day as conquerors now carried the seeds of a legend that would spread throughout the galaxy. They had witnessed the awakening of sleeping giants, and their testimony would ensure that no species would repeat their mistake. As the alien fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the Wardens began their return to hibernation. Their duty was fulfilled, their vigil renewed, and Earth remained safe under the protection of guardians who would wait another 500,000 years if necessary. The galaxy had learned a truth that would echo through the ages. Humanity's greatest gift to the universe was not their technology or their transcendence, but their unbreakable promise to protect what they loved, even from beyond the veil of existence itself.